6/28/04, day 6 in the morning. It is Monday morning. Yesterday, Beth and I had a very exciting day. It began as we got up and began planning out what we were going to do. It was decided that we would go for a hike on the South Fork of Eagle River. Dad, Ron, Pete, Paula, the girls, Beth, and I all decided to go. The drive over went pretty fast. Ron pointed out the new development that had gone up since they had moved in. The road we traveled on was a dirt road, and only one family was living on that side of the valley. Ron explained that the owner had just jury-rigged his own hydroelectric power for his house. It is exactly this kind of resourcefulness that I think characterizes the true Alaskans. They seem to have the knowledge, skills, and ability to fit every situation that they're put in. Once we hit the trailhead, Beth and I were surprised by the initial uphill climb. We thought we had adequately described to you how our low level of physical state was in. Our easy hike was beginning to look a lot more challenging than we thought. Needless to say, we were getting tired and a little bit nervous. Thankfully, about a third of the way up the mountain, the trail leveled out. It then followed the contour of the mountain range. We slowly worked our way down back into the valley. Beth and I initially fell behind the rest of the group. Once it leveled out, we could have caught up, but we actually were having a pretty good time spending some quality time together, so we stayed behind. This was a pretty good idea because it gave us a chance to get some really good photographs of the flowers, the views, and a few of the songbirds along the way. The terrain was pretty interesting. It reminded me quite a lot of the White Mountains. Above us was the timberline, while below us was the more forested region, with Eagle River working its way through the valley. Occasionally a small pond or swamp area would stand out below. The trail itself was a subalpine area with black spruce and scrub brushes interspersed. There were many varieties of wildflowers, particularly pink wild roses and some very pretty purple flowers. At one point we caught up to the others at a bridge that crossed over the river. It was a nice picture opportunity. We decided to continue on a short distance further to a point where Ron told us that you could see a small boulder field, and at that point decided to head back. Throughout the hike we saw a number of other hikers, including a couple of groups that were actually running the trail. Ouch! According to Ron, these gluttons for punishment were probably training for one of the many races that were coming up over the summer, including, although it had just passed, the 4th of July Marathon Mountain Run in Seward. Some of these hikers had some very pretty dogs with them. After a short walk later over the next rise, we hit the turnaround point. At this stop, it was decided that Dad, Paula, and the girls would head back together. Ron and Pete would continue on, while Beth and I would slowly work our way back to the car, and hopefully Ron and Pete would catch up to us before we made it back to the parking lot. After about 10 minutes back, Beth was looking down into the valley and saw a moose way across the valley. It moved behind a ridge and I never saw it. Needless to say, I was suddenly more aware of what was going around me, and about 10 minutes more down the trail, I pointed out a bald eagle that was sitting on a tree near one of the ponds. The rest of our hike back seemed to be mostly uneventful. At first I considered and talked with Beth about possibly taking a left onto a side trail that would lead uphill to a saddle in between two of the peaks. We both agreed that we were tired and didn't know when Ron and Pete were going to catch up to us, so we decided not to try it. This was a pretty good choice because right as we got down near the parking lot, I had stopped and was taking some pictures of a dead black spruce that was dead due to a beetle that was decimating the species. Beth was getting bored and began looking around. All of a sudden, I heard her say, "Jeff, there's a bear up there." I looked at her in disbelief as she had her camera pointed up the hill. I quickly grabbed my binoculars and followed her line of sight. Sure enough, there it was, a true honest-to-God wild grizzly bear. Beth quickly asked, "Is that a black bear or a grizzly?" "A grizzly," I cried. I immediately grabbed my camera and began clicking away. I then switched to movie mode so that it would be clearer as to what we were seeing. It was uphill about halfway up the slope, working its way across the slope as such. And I have a little picture in here. You can see you've got the top of the mountains going along there with the little saddle that we possibly coming along the trail. We were going to take that left up the trail. Well, we had gotten down to about here, and that's where we saw the bear. And so, nice little picture showing what was going on. We were anywhere from an eighth of a mile to a quarter mile away from the bear, and it was walking at a steady pace, which was much faster than I had imagined it would be. It wasn't too long before it crossed the path heading up to the ridge. At that point, I realized that had we chosen to go left and go up there, we would have probably intersected the bear almost exactly at that time. I have read many books where people have had trouble telling the difference between a black bear and a grizzly, and let me tell you, there was no doubt in my mind. First of all, although it was far away, it was very clear that this bear was huge, bigger than any black bear I had ever seen. It was a two-toned brown color. There was a lighter brown on its head and shoulders, and a darker brown on the rest of its body. It had a different snout shape. Yes, I could even tell the snout shape from where we were through the binoculars. I specifically noted a whitish tip to the front of the feet, probably its claws, and it had the classic hump to its forward shoulders. At one point, it kind of charged down the hill and had both Beth and I a little bit nervous. Two women joined us on the trail. They had just started their hike up. We pointed out the bear. Both agreed it was a very fat, very large grizzly or brown bear. These women were from Alaska and both went to school at Dartmouth. After viewing the bear for a minute, the girls continued up. To each their own, I guess. We saw a couple more groups go by, and so we pointed it out to them. Surprisingly, most of them were pretty nonchalant about the whole deal. As the bear began to go out of sight, Beth and I expressed the hope that Ron and Pete had gotten a chance to see it, especially Pete because he had his video camera with him. After waiting for about 15 to 20 minutes, we gave up hope of this, and shortly thereafter, Pete and Ron came running down the trail, literally running down the trail. They had been told by some of the other hikers about the bear and were rushing back to see if they could get a glimpse. It was a shame that Beth and I were the only ones to actually get to see it from our group. I do have to say that this has been the highlight of my trip so far. I really, honestly, truly never expected to see a bear on this trip. I did hope to see one, and kind of thought that if I did, it would be more likely while we were driving. I had no idea it would be while we were hiking, or that I would be so close to it. I've definitely gained a new respect for the power and majesty of the creature, the way that its powerful gait moved it along the slope with its brown fur catching the light. Wow, stellar day. We actually finished the day with a trip to the Alaskan Botanical Gardens. The gardens weren't much to look at, but there was a craft fair there. We got to see a woman with a small owl and some other cool booths. This was awesome. By the way, and it's not written